Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Dipayan Ghosh, and today we are going to explore one of the most beautiful, emotionally profound, and spiritually transformative placement that can appear in Gemini astrology. Sorry, Jaimini astrology. Okay, and if you ever wondered what kind of person your future spouse might truly be at your soul level, not just how you look, not just what profession they have, but how they make you feel, how they love, why destiny brings them into your life, and what karmic lesson they are meant to awaken within you, then this video is going to answer all of those questions. Alright, today we are going to talk about Moon as your Dharakaraka. Now, if you have watched my previous videos on Dharakaraka, you already know that this is not simply another indicator for marriage. This is not just another technique for predicting whether you will marry early or late. The Dharakaraka is something much deeper than that. It represents the soul of the person your destiny is preparing for you. It represents the individual whose presence becomes one of the greatest catalysts for your spiritual evolution. Many people spend years trying to understand whether someone is compatible with them or not, but they compare with zodiac sign, check the seventh house, compare with moon signs, examine Navamsa, and although every one of these techniques have its own importance, but the Dharakaraka ask an entirely different questions. Instead of you know like asking who you want to marry, it asks who your soul actually needs. That is the completely different question. But because the person we desire is not always the person we require for our highest evolution. Sometimes destiny sends us someone who comforts us, sometimes destiny sends us someone who transforms us, and sometimes destiny sends us someone who quietly heals wounds we never even realized we carried. That is exactly where the Moon Darakaraka becomes extraordinary, because when the moon becomes your Dharakaraka, your soul is no longer searching for power. It is no longer searching for status. It is no longer searching for excitement. Your soul begins searching for emotional safety. It begins searching for emotional it's yeah emotional safety. It begins searching for someone you know whose presence itself feels like a home. Before we understand what that really means, we first need to understand the system from which we Dharakaraka originates. Okay, because without understanding Jaimini astrology itself, the Dharakaraka often gets misunderstood. So most people today are familiar with Parashari astrology, right? In Parashari astrology, every planet has a fixed responsibility. Venus always represents relationship, Jupiter always represents wisdom, the sun represents authority, the moon represents mind, and everything follows a fixed system of meanings. This system is guided astrologers for thousands of years and remains incredibly accurate. But Maharishi Jaimini looked at astrology from another perspective. Instead of assigning fixed role to planets, he asked a fascinating question. What if each soul enters this lifetime with a different lesson? What if every person has a different karma? Then why should every planet perform the exact same role in every single chart? This led to one of the most sophisticated system within Vedic astrology, the Charakaraka system. The word Chara means movable. Unlike fixed significators, these significators changes from one birth chart to another. The planet themselves remain the same, but their responsibilities change depending upon their exact degree within their respective sign. This creates an astrology that becomes deeply personalized. No two charts express this karmic role in a exactly the same way. One person's Jupiter may become Atmakaraka, another person's Jupiter may become Dharakaraka, but someone else's Jupiter may represent something entirely different. Everything depends upon planetary degrees. Among all of these Charakarakas, among all of these Charakaraka, one occupies an unequally uniquely sacred position, the Dharakaraka. The The literal meaning of Darakaraka is the significator of spouse. Traditionally, astrologers determine the Darakaraka by looking at the seven classical planets: the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Whichever planet occupies the lowest degree within its sign becomes the Darakaraka. Now, on the surface of this, sounds like a simple mathematical calculation, but spiritually it represents something much more profound. Why the lowest degree? Why not the highest? And why not the strongest? Why would the smallest numerical value represent something so important? The answer lies within the philosophy of the soul evolution itself. Think about your birth chart for a moment. Every planet represents a certain psychological energy: confidence, love, communication, responsibility, wisdom, emotions, and discipline. Each one exists within you the same extent, some extent. But the Darakaraka represents the area where your own soul remains least developed, not weak in a negative sense or in incomplete. Imagine your soul as a beautiful circle. Every lifetime feels another missing piece of that circle. But the Darakaraka points toward one of those missing pieces. It reveals an emotional quality that cannot fully develop in isolation. It must develop through another human being. That is why many advanced astrologers describe the Darakaraka as a soul mirror. Your spouse does not simply enter your life to make you happy. They enter your life to reflect the part of yourself you have not fully embraced. They become a living mirror. Sometimes that mirror comforts you, sometimes it challenges you, sometimes it exposes your deepest fears, and sometimes it heals wounds that have existed across multiple incarnations. Okay, when people hear the phrase soul mirror, they often imagine romance, but this mirror is much more deeper than romance. A mirror reflects truth, not fantasy or not desire, but the truth, and the truth often becomes the greatest teacher. This is why the Darakaraka should never be confused within the seventh house. The seventh house certainly remains one of the most important significator of marriage, but it tells about the institution of marriage, the marriage timing, the legal union, the external partnership, the social contract between two individuals. It answers question like when marriage may happen, when marriage may happen, whether marriage becomes stable, what type of spouse appears from worldly perspective. But the Darakaraka answers an entirely different category of questions. All right, it asks like why does why d- I mean why does this person enter your life? What emotional frequency do they carry? What karmic lesson binds both soul together? Which psychological qualities naturally exist within your spouse? Why does being with this individual transform your consciousness? Those answers belong to the Darakaraka. Now imagine that among all the seven planets, the moon becomes your Darakaraka. Immediately the symbolism automatically changes dramatically, because the moon is unlike every other planet. The sun shines, the Mars fights, Mercury thinks, Jupiter teaches, Venus attracts, Saturn disciplines, but the moon nurtures. Moon does not conquer. The moon embrace. Okay, it does not demand attention. It creates belonging. It does not seek admiration. It seeks, you know, emotional connection. It is the planet responsible for our emotional world, our memories, our subconscious, our habits, our attachment style, our ability to feel safe, our ability to trust, our need to care for others, our need to cared for. When this gentle and deeply emotional planet becomes your Dharakaraka, your soul begins attracting a partner whose greatest language is emotional nourishment. Not material wealth, not social prestige, not dominance, not intellectual superiority, but emotional nourishment. This is one of the most misunderstood placement, because many people assume nurturing simply means kindness. It goes much deeper than kindness, you believe me. A moon Dharakaraka spouse possesses an instinctive awareness of emotions. Often before words are even spoken, they notice changes in your expression, they notice your silence, they notice your energy. Sometimes they recognize your emotional state before you yourself become aware of it. Like, have you ever met someone who, like, somehow knows something is wrong even when you insist everything is fine? Sometimes, we ask, if we care about someone so much, we ask, like, simply, like, are you okay, or like, are you fine, or something like that, but somehow you begin crying without understanding why. But that is lunar energy. The moon functions like emotional intuitions. It observes invisible waves. It senses shifts within the atmosphere of a relationship. It becomes one of the defining characteristics of a moon Dharakaraka spouse. Their emotional intelligence is often remarkably high, not necessarily because they studied psychology, not because they learned, emotional techniques, but because they naturally feel emotional currents. Their heart becomes like a compass. It constantly searches for emotional harmony. For them, love is rarely expressed through grand speeches. Instead, love appears in ordinary moments. They remember whether you ate today. They ask if you have reached home safely or not. They notice when your voice sounds tired. They bring you water before you ask. They quietly adjust, small detail around you simply because they know those little comforts make your day easier. Someone looking from outside may not, even recognize these actions as expression of love. But to a moon Dharakaraka spouse, these ordinary acts are sacred because nurturing is their love language. They do not merely tell you they care, they create environments where you feel cared for. And that subtle difference changes everything. One of the deepest psychological ideas behind this placement is the spouse does not simply nurture your life, they nurture your nervous system. They gradually teach your body what emotional safety feel like. Many people carrying Moon Darakaraka have unknowingly experienced some form of emotional emptiness earlier in life. That does not necessarily means, severe trauma. Sometimes it simply means emotional nourishment was inconsistent. Sometimes feelings remained unspoken. Sometimes affection existed but emotional validation did not. Sometimes responsibility became greater than tenderness. Over time, the heart quietly adapts. It becomes independent, strong, self reliant, and beneath that strength often exists an unnoticed longing, the longing to finally relax, to finally stop, carrying everything alone, to finally allow someone else to care. That is often why destiny sends a lunar spouse. Not because you are incapable, but because your soul needs to rediscover softness. The Moon Darakaraka partner becomes a gentle reminder that vulnerability is not weakness. Receiving love is not weakness. Depending on another person from time to time is not weakness. Truth strength is not measured by how much you carry alone. Sometimes true strength is measured by how deeply you allow yourself to be loved. And when that realization begins unfolding within a relationship, something remarkable starts happening. The marriage stops become merely a partnership. It becomes a place of emotional healing. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of the moon as Tarakaraka. Many people believe that a soulmate is someone who creates butterflies in your stomach, someone who fills your life with excitement, someone who sweeps you off your feet with grand romantic gestures. Now, don't get me wrong, romance certainly has its place, but the moon teaches us that the deepest form of love is often quieter than people imagine. It is the kind of love that makes your nervous system feels like calm instead of anxious. It is a kind of love where silence never feels uncomfortable. It is a kind of love where simply sitting beside someone after a difficult day feels more comforting than a thousand beautiful words. This is the frequency that a Moon Darakaraka spouse naturally carries. When they enter your life, they are not trying to impress you every single day. They are trying to become your emotional home. The word home is incredibly important when discussing the moon, because in Vedic astrology the moon has a always because the moon has always been associated with emotional security, and emotional security is something very different from physical security. You can live inside the most luxurious house in the world and still never feel emotionally safe. Likewise, two people can live inside a very small apartment with almost nothing, yet feel completely fulfilled because they have each other. That is lunar consciousness. Home is not simply a location, it is an emotional state, right? When the moon becomes your Darakaraka, your spouse naturally understands this principle. They don't merely build a house, they build an atmosphere where your heart gradually begins lowering the walls it has carried for years. One of the greatest strengths of a Moon Darakaraka spouse is their incredible capacity for emotional observation. Unlike Mercury, which gathers information through logic, or Mars, which reacts immediately through action, the Moon observes, it watches, it listens, it notices patterns. Your spouse may remember conversations you completely forgot. They may remember your favorite food after hearing you mention it only once. They may remember how you reacted during a difficult moment months ago, not because they are deliberately keeping a track, but because emotional experiences leave deep impressions upon the lunar mind. This makes them remarkably attentive partners. Sometimes they will recognize that you are becoming emotionally exhausted before you even realize it yourself. They may quietly encourage you to take a break. They may insist that you rest. They may ask you what has been bothering you. At first you may even wonder how they knew something was wrong. The answer is simply they felt it. The moon experienced life through emotional perception rather than intellectual analysis. This naturally gives many Moon Darakaraka spouse a very emotional quotient. They understand feelings that cannot easily be explained within words, and because of this sensitivity, they often becomes extraordinary listeners. Notice something interesting. People naturally being share, people naturally being begin sharing their problems with lunar personalities. Friends open up to them. Family members seeks their advice. Children trust them. Even strangers sometimes feel unexpectedly comfortable around them. Why? Because the moon creates emotional permission. It creates an atmosphere where people feel accepted, without judgment, without pressure, without needing to pretend. This nurturing quality often extend into every area of their life. If they see someone hungry, their first instinct their first instinct may be to feed them. If they see someone crying, they naturally move toward them rather than away from them. If they notice someone struggle emotionally, they often feel an almost irresistible desire to help. Sometimes this become one of the of no- sometimes this become one of their greatest blessings. Sometimes it becomes one of their greatest challenges, because people with strong lunar energy often carry the emotions of everyone around them. They don't merely sympathize, they empathize. Sorry, what do I say? Empathize, sympathize and empathize, sorry. So what I was saying, yeah, so they do not merely sympathize, they empathize. Okay, there is significant difference. Sympathy observes suffering, empathy experiences it. As a result, Moon Darakaraka spouse must learn healthy emotional boundaries throughout life. Otherwise, they may have, you know, intentionally absorb stress that never belongs to them. This sensitivity also shapes the way they communicate inside relationships. Unlike Mars, who confronts problems directly, unlike Saturn, who may remain silent for long periods, or Mercury, who debates through logic, the moon communicates through emotional expression. They want reassurance, they want warmth, they want honesty, they want to know how you truly feel. If something appears emotionally distant, they notice it almost immediately. Even subtle emotional changes rarely escape their awareness. That is why emotional neglect affects lunar personalities much more deeply than many other planetary archetypes. You might think nothing has changed. You may simply be busy with work. You may be exhausted. You may become quieter for a few days. But your Moon Darakaraka spouse immediately begins sensing that emotional distance. Not because they are insecure by nature, but because emotional connection is the language through which they understand love. For them, consistency matters enormously. Small daily expressions of affection often mean much more than occasional grand gestures. A simply message asking how their day went, holding their hand while walking, remembering something important they told you, sitting together during dinner without distractions. These ordinary moments carry extraordinary meaning for lunar personalities. They are nourished through consistency rather than intensity. They and this reveals something profound about why destiny choose this particular spouse for you. Remember what we discussed earlier. The Darakaraka represents the area where your own soul requires growth. If your soul attracts a Moon Darakaraka spouse, then emotional maturity becomes one of your greatest karmic lessons. The universe is gently asking you, can you become emotionally available for her? Or can you learn to receive care without feeling uncomfortable? Can you express affection openly instead of hiding behind pride? Or can you create emotional safety for another human being? Because ultimately, your spouse is teaching you exactly what your soul came here to learn. They are not merely nurturing you, they are educating your heart. Now, one misconception I often hear is that Moon Darakaraka automatically means your spouse will be overly emotional or constantly crying. That is a very superficial understanding. Sensitivity does not mean weakness. Emotional intelligence does not mean emotional instability. In fact, many Moon Darakaraka spouse possesses incredible emotional resilience. The difference is that they allow themselves to feel. They don't suppress emotions until they become destructive. They process them, they express them, they release them. And this emotional flexibility often allows them to recover from difficult experiences much more gracefully than people who constantly bottle everything inside. Another fascinating characteristics of moon is it's that it is the connection of rhythm. Think about nature itself. The moon governs, tides, monthly cycles, biological rhythms. Even human sleep's pattern have a long been associated with lunar influence. Nothing about moon remains completely static. It waxes, it wanes, it grows, it withdraws. Your spouse may naturally move through emotional phases in a similar manner. Some days they may become highly expressive. Other days they may become quieter. Sometimes they seek closeness. Sometimes they simply need peaceful solitude. These changes are not necessarily signs that something is wrong. They are often reflections of natural emotional rhythms. Understanding these rhythms becomes one of the keys to maintaining harmony within the relationship. Instead of expecting emotional consistency every single day, you begin appreciating emotional authenticity. You allow each other space to experience life honestly, without judgment, without unnecessary pressure. One beautiful quality of Moon Darakaraka spouses is their remarkable appreciation for family traditions. They usually value emotional continuity across generations. Family gatherings, festivals, cooking together, celebrating birthdays, or creating meaningful rituals. Photographs filled with memories. These things matter deeply to them, not because they are sentimental for no reason, but because memories themselves become emotional anchors. The moon governs memory. Every meaningful experience becomes a part of their emotional landscape. This naturally makes many lunar spouses wonderful parents as well. Their nurturing instinct extends beyond marriage. They instinctively know how to comfort children, how to create emotional safety, how to teach through patience rather than fear. Even if they pursue demanding careers, the emotional well-being of their family usually remains one of their highest priorities. Okay, now let's move beyond psychology and begin examining how this lunar energy expresses itself physically. Because one of the fascinating aspects of Darakaraka analysis is that the planet often leaves visible signature upon the spouse's appearance. Moon governs water. In Ayurveda, water nourishes, it softens, it cools, it sustains life. Naturally these same qualities become appearing within the physical body itself. Okay, instead of sharp angular feature commonly associated with Mars, or the lean skeletal structure oftenly connected with Saturn, Moon Darakaraka spouse often usually possess softer, rounder, and more approachable facial features. There is, there is a there is often a natural fullness within the face. Their expressions appear gentle. Their eyes become one of their most striking characteristics. Many classical texts describe lunar eyes as a bright, moist, calm, and almost liquid in appearance. Rather than piercing your soul through intensity, they comfort your heart through warmth. When they smile, there is often a softness that immediately makes people very welcomed. Their complexion is frequently fair, pale, creamy, or naturally luminous, although you know this can vary according to genetics and other planetary influences within the chart. What remains remarkably consistent is the cooling aura of their project. You feel relaxed around them. There is something soothing about their overall presence. Even their voice often carries softness. They rarely sounds aggressive unless the moon is severely afflicted. Okay. Many moon Darakaraka spouses also possesses natural expressive face. Their emotions become visible almost instantly. You don't have to guess whether they are happy or not, or grateful or concerned. Their face gently communicates with their heart is experiencing. This emotional transparency often becomes one of their most endearing qualities. However, planetary dignity modifies this physical characteristic significantly, but if the moon is exalted in Taurus, many of this lunar quality becomes refined and beautifully balanced. The spouse may possesses exceptional facial symmetry, radiant skin, graceful feature, and an overall appearance that feels calm, elegant, and emotionally inviting. There is a quiet beauty about them that doesn't demand attention but effortlessly attracts it. People often feel comfortable with their presence without understanding exactly why. On the other hand, if the moon debilitated in Scorpio or heavily afflicted by harsh influences such as Saturn or Mars, the natural softness of the moon may become partially restricted. Instead of appearing relaxed, the spouse may carry emotional tension within their expressions. Their body may appear leaner or slightly drawn. Okay, the face may reflect deeper emotional intensity rather than peaceful serenity. It doesn't diminish their beauty, but it simply changes the way lunar energy expresses itself. And that reminds us of one of the most important principle in astrology. No single placement should ever be judged in isolation. The moon Darakaraka tells us the fundamental archetype. Its dignity aspects, conjunctions, Navamsa place, and overall chart context determines how that archetype ultimately manifests. And that is exactly what we are going to explore now. The condition of the moon tells us how naturally these nurturing qualities flow, but it does not tells us everything. There is another layer that completely transforms the interpretation, and that is the zodiac sign in which your moon Darakaraka is placed. Think of the moon as an actor, all right? Now, no matter how talented the actor may be, but the role is given changes the way they perform. Okay. Similarly, the moon always carries its nurturing nature, but every zodiac sign gives that nurturing a completely different personality. This is why two people can both have moon as their Darakaraka, yet marry individuals who seem completely different from one another. The core energy remains lunar. The expression changes according to the sign. All right. Now let's begin with one of the strongest placement. If your moon Dharakaraka is placed in Taurus, the moon becomes exalted. In classical astrology, exaltation represents the highest refinement of the planet's natural qualities. It is where the planet performs with remarkable stability and confidence. A Taurus moon spouse is emotionally grounded. They are dependable. They are patient. Alright? They rarely make impulsive emotional decision. But instead of expressing love dramatically, they express it consistently. Every single day they create small acts of comfort that slowly build an incredibly secure relationship. For them, love is something tangible: cooking your favorite meal, making sure the home feels peaceful, remembering your routines, supporting your ambitions quietly without demanding recognition. These spouse believe that love is real. Sorry, what I'm saying. This spouse believes that real love is built through consistency rather than excitement. Okay, they also possesses an appreciation for beauty, not superficial beauty but comfortably beauty. A beautiful home, comfortable furniture, pleasant fragrances. Okay, good food, soft music, everything around them becomes part of their emotional environment. They understand that our surrounding influence our emotional well-being. This is one of the reasons exalted moon individuals often creates homes that immediately makes guests feel like welcomed. The atmosphere itself feels peaceful. Emotionally, they become an anchor during difficult period of life. When everyone else begins panicking, they remain calm. When uncertainty appears, they focus on creating stability. Their greatest lesson is teaching you that emotional security is built through ordinary daily actions rather than extraordinary moments. Now compare that with the moon Dharakaraka placed in Cancer. Here the moon occupies its own sign. This placement amplifies every lunar quality. Everything becomes more emotional, more intuitive, more protective, more nurturing. If Taurus represents stability, Cancer represents unconditional emotional attachment. This spouse creates family wherever they go. They care deeply about traditions, parents, children's, festivals, shared memories, photographs, old stories, and etc. For them, relationship is living emotional histories. Nothing meaningful is forgotten. If you tell them about an important event from your childhood, they may remember it years later. If you once mentioned about if you once mentioned your favorite meal from childhood, don't be surprised if they eventually prepare it for you. That is how their memory functions. All right, the moon governs memory. All right, Cancer magnifies it. This spouse becomes extremely protective of the people they love, sometimes almost to the point of worrying excessively. Okay, if you are traveling, they want to know whether you arrived safely or not. If you are feeling unwell, they will naturally begin taking care of you, not because they believe you are incapable, but because caring for others is how they express affection. However, this deep attachment also creates vulnerability. If emotional trust is broken, Cancer Moon spouse may withdraw into themselves, not because they wish to punish anyone, but because emotional safety has been disturbed. Their lesson within marriage often creates in their lesson within marriage often resolves around learning healthy emotional boundaries without losing their incredible capacity of love. Now let's move toward one of the most psychologically complex placement. If your moon Darakaraka falls in Scorpio, the moon becomes debilitated. Many people immediately becomes frightened when they hear about the word debilitated. Please don't. Debilitation means never failure. It simply means planet express itself through greater internal challenges. Scorpio is a sign associated with transformation, secrets, psychological depth, loss, rebirth, emotional intensity, and etc. And when the gentle moon enters this environment, emotions become extraordinarily deep. Okay, this spouse may experience feeling more intensely than most people around them. Their love becomes profound, their loyalty becomes profound, even their pain becomes profound. Surface level relationships surface level relationships rarely satisfy them. They crave complete emotional honesty. They want to know every hidden part of the person they love. Nothing artificial appeals to them. Because of this intensity, they often become exceptional at understanding human psychology. They can sense deception quickly. They notice emotional inconsistency. Sometimes they understand what people truly feel, even when those people are pretending otherwise. The challenge comes when this emotional depth turns inward. Old wounds may remain alive for a long time. Forgiveness may require significant emotional processing. Trust becomes sacred. Once earned, it becomes incredibly strong. Once broken, rebuilding it takes genuinely very much effort. If such a spouse learns emotional healing, they become one of the most devoted partners imaginable. Their love survives storms that would end many other relationships. Now, suppose your moon Darakaraka occupies Aries. Fire meets water, emotional meets action. The spouse rarely keeps emotions hidden for long. If they are happy, you immediately know. If they are upset, you immediately know. If something needs attention, they prefer addressing it directly rather than allowing resentment to accumulate. They often become very proactive caretakers. If a problem appears, they begin solving it immediately. Sometimes this makes him impulsive, but beneath that impulsiveness lies genuine concern. They simply dislike watching people they love suffer unnecessarily. Their lesson is learning patience. Not every emotional situation requires immediate action, but sometimes people simply, you know, people simply need someone willing to listen. If the moon occupies Gemini, nurturing becomes intellectual, conversation becomes affection, curiosity becomes intimacy. Okay, this spouse enjoys discussing ideas, sharing stories, learning together, exploring different perspectives. They often possesses youthful energy regardless of age. Humor humor become one of the greatest strength. Laughter fills the relationship naturally. Emotionally, they process feelings by taking care of them. By talking about them. Silence really helps them. Open communications becomes their medicine. If they ever feel ignored intellectually, emotional distance may gradually develop. For them, conversation is one of the highest expressions of love. When the moon occupies Leo, emotional warmth combines with dignity. This spouse possesses tremendous generosity. They enjoy making the people they love feel special. They celebrate your achievements. They proudly support your ambitions. Okay, they want the relationship itself to shine. Recognition becomes important, not necessarily public recognition but personal appreciation too. They simply wants to know that their efforts matter. If their emotional contributions constantly go unnoticed, disappointment may quietly grow. But when appreciated sincerely, Leo moon spouses becomes incredibly loyal companion. They protect those they love with remarkable courage. If the moon enters Virgo, okay, nurturing becomes practical. Instead of saying I love you repeatedly, they may organize your schedule to help to help to solve your problems. Okay, remember your appointments. Take care of countless small responsibilities. That quality improves your life. Sometimes people misunderstand Virgo's practical nature as emotional distance. In reality, this spouse often expresses love through service. Act as a act of care replace dramatic declarations. If something in your life isn't functioning properly, they intensively begin improving it. Their challenge lies in avoiding perfectionism. Sometimes they become so focused on helping that they forget simply to enjoy their relationship. If your moon Darakaraka occupies Libra, harmony becomes foundation of emotional life. Conflict exhausts them. Peace nourishes them. They naturally seek balance in every interaction. Compromises comes easily. Diplomacy becomes second nature. They dislike emotional extremes. Now, instead of preferred relationships built upon mutual respect, beauty, or cooperation, many Libra moon spouses appreciate art, music, interior decoration, elegant surroundings, not because they are materialistic, but because beauty itself creates emotional balance within them. The greatest lesson often involves learning that genuine harmony sometimes requires difficult conversation rather than averting conflict altogether. Okay, now consider Capricorn. Okay, here emotional expression becomes disciplined, reserved, responsible. This spouse may not constantly verbalize affection. Instead, they demonstrate love through reliability. They fulfill responsibilities. They remain present during difficult periods. They sacrifice personal comfort for family stability. At first, they may appear emotionally distant, but over time, their consistency reveals remarkable depth. Their love is not loud, it is dependable. Once they commit, they take commitment seriously. Duty and devotion becomes inseparable. Their lesson involves becoming more emotionally expressive without feeling vulnerable. If the moon occupies Aquarius, emotional connection develops through friendship first. This spouse values mutual respect, shared ideals, meaningful conversation, personal freedom. They genuinely enjoy building relationship based upon equality. Many Aquarius moon spouses possesses humanitarian instinct. They naturally care about society, communities, collective well-being. Sometimes they appear emotionally detached, but in reality they simply possess feeling differently. They require both closeness and independence. Giving them emotional breathing space often strengthens the relationship rather than weakening it. When the moon occupies Pisces, compassion reaches extraordinary heights. This is one of the most spiritually sensitive placement. These spouses often possess vivid imagination, deep empathy, powerful intuition, sometimes even profound spiritual inclinations. Alright, they easily absorb the emotional atmosphere around them. Acts of kindness affect them deeply. Beauty moves around them. Beauty moves them. Music moves them. Prayer moves them. Love itself becomes something sacred. Their greatest strength is unconditional compassion. Their greatest challenge is maintaining emotional boundaries. Without boundaries, they may carry emotional burdens belonging to everyone around them. Finally, if Moon occupies Sagittarius, nurturing becomes inspirational. The spouse encourages growth, exploration, wisdom, faith. Okay, instead of protecting you from every difficulty, they inspire you to become stronger through experiences. They love learning, traveling, discussing philosophy, exploring spirituality. Optimism becomes contagious around them. Even during periods, they naturally search for meaning rather than despair. Okay, their greatest lesson involves balancing freedom with emotional consistency. Now, after understanding the science, another fascinating question naturally arises, that is, where are you actually likely to meet this spouse? Under what circumstances does destiny arrange this encounter? That answer comes when the house placement of the Moon Darakaraka. Because while the sign tell us who the spouse is internally, the house often reveals where their influence enters your life and what area of life becomes transformed after marriage. And once we understand those house placements, the entire picture begins coming together in remarkably precise way. All right. The house placement of Moon Darakaraka is one of the most practical layer of interpretation because it answers a question that almost everyone eventually asks. Where does this relationship enters in my life? Through what area of life does destiny introduce this person? You see, every house in astrology governs a different arena of experience. The sign tells us how spouse naturally behaves. The planet tells you the psychological archetype, but the house tells us where the karmic story unfold. Think of the birth chart like a grand stage. The Moon Darakaraka is one of the central characters. Alright? The house is the stage upon which that character performs. When all three layers are combined, the interpretation becomes remarkably precise. They begin with the Moon Darakaraka placed in the first house. This is one of the strongest placement because the spouse directly influences your personal identity. Marriage becomes one of the biggest turning points of your life. After meeting this person, people may even notice visible changes in your appearance, confidence, lifestyle, and emotional maturity. The spouse does not simply enters your life, they become deeply woven into your own sense of self. Many natives with this placement often feel as feel as though life is divided into two chapters, before marriage and after marriage. Their partner becomes the emotional mirror through which they begin understanding themselves more deeply than ever before. There is usually immediate comfort between both individuals. The emotional connection develops naturally because both people intensively recognize each other's presence. If the moon is well placed, sorry, if the moon is well supported, this placement often produces a marriage where both partners become each other's greatest emotional support system. All right. Now, suppose Moon Darakaraka occupies your second house. The entire relationship becomes closely connected with family values, wealth, traditions, emotional security through the household. Many people with this placement meet their spouse through family circles, relatives, cultural gatherings, or emotional matchmaking. Even if the introduction happens independently, the families usually play an important role in strengthening the relationship. Alright. The spouse naturally contributes towards building long term financial stability, but more importantly, they create emotional richness within the family. They often becomes the person who keeps everyone connected during festivals, celebrations, and important family occasions. The home becomes filled with warmth because of their presence. They believe that prosperity is measured not only through money but through unity. All right. Now, if Moon occupies the third house, the relationship through communication, the relation develops through communication. Many natives meet such a spouse through siblings, neighbors, social medias, online communities, education, short distance travel, or shared hobbies. Friendship usually forms before romance. This spouse enjoys talking, sharing ideas, planning adventures together. They encourage the native to become more expressive. Many couples with this placement become genuinely companion who enjoy learning together throughout life. Instead of depending entirely upon emotional intensity, they build intimacy through continuous communication. When the moon occupies your fourth house, one theme dominates above everything else: home. Just home. This is perhaps one of the purest domestic placement in the entire chart. The spouse naturally transforms the house into emotional sanctuary. They deeply value peace inside the family. Arguments and unnecessary conflicts emotionally exhaust them. Many such spouses enjoy decorating the home, cooking, gardening, caring, or parenting, or preserving family traditions. After marriage, the native often experiences a tremendous increase of emotional stability because the spouse creates an environment where healing becomes possible. The house itself begins feeling alive, not because it becomes luxurious, but because it becomes emotionally peaceful. If the moon Tarakaraka occupies the fifth house, romance become one of the defining themes of the marriage. Often, very often this placement supports love marriage. The relationship usually begins through shared interest, education, creative pursuits, entertainment, or mutual hobbies. The emotional bond develops gradually through enjoyment of each other's company. Children frequently become an important source of happiness within the marriage. Creativity also flourishes. Many many couple inspire each other artistically, intellectually, or spiritually. There is often a youthful quality to the to the relationship that remains alive for many years. All right. Now let's discuss one of the more challenging placements. If the moon Darakaraka occupies sixth house, okay, many people immediately assume the marriage will fail. That is not what this placement means. All right. The sixth house represents service, daily responsibilities, health, discipline, problem solving. Okay. Very often the couple meets through work environment, hospitals, healthcare, professions, or situation involving routine responsibilities. The relationship itself becomes a vehicle for resolving karmic debt accumulated across previous lifetimes. Challenges certainly arise, but these challenges exist. Uh, to strengthen both individual rather than separating them. Marriage becomes less about fantasy and more about teamwork. Both partners gradually learn that true love sometimes appears through ordinary responsibilities, helping each other during illness, supporting them, supporting each other's career, managing daily life together. Those simple actions become sacred expressions of commitment. When the moon occupies the seventh house, we arrive at one of the classical marriage placement. The spouse directly reflects the native emotional needs. This relationship often feels naturally balanced between both because both individuals intensively complement each other. The marriage itself become one of the central purpose of life. The spouse frequently possesses excellent interpersonal skills and understands relationships remarkably well. Mutual understanding develops naturally when both partners prioritize emotional honesty. If supported by benefic influences, this placement often produces long lasting marital harmony. Now consider the 8th house. This is one of the most mysterious placements in astrology. The relationship rarely remains ordinary. Instead, it becomes deeply transformative. Many people with this placement feel as through meeting their spouse permanently changes who they are. The marriage may involve shared financial responsibilities, psychological healing, spiritual transformations, inherited responsibilities, or profound emotional intimacy. Sometimes the relationship passes through significant crises, but those crises becomes catalyst for growth rather than destruction. All right. The spouse encourages the native to confront fear they have avoided for years. By facing those fears together, both individuals become emotionally stronger. When the moon Darakaraka occupies ninth house, destiny often introduces the spouse through travel, higher education, spirituality, philosophy, religious activities, or foreign cultures. The spouse frequently becomes a guide rather than merely a companion. They broaden the native's understanding of life. Together, both people often explore different cultures, spiritual traditions, or systems of higher knowledge. Okay, the marriage itself become a journey of wisdom. Instead of simply building a family, they build a shared philosophy of life. The spouse inspires faith during difficult periods and constantly encourages personal growth. If the moon occupies the 10th house, the spouse significantly influences career and public reputations. Many people marry someone who is professionally accomplished or highly respected. Sometimes the spouse directly supports the native's career. Other times, they becomes the emotional foundation that allows the native to pursue ambitious goals confidently. Either way, professional life changes dramatically after marriage. The spouse understands responsibility, public image, long term planning. They often encourage discipline while simultaneously providing emotional encouragement behind the scene. If the moon Darakaraka occupies the 11th house, friendship becomes strongest pillar of the marriage. Many couples being as friends long before romance develops. The spouse often enters through social circles, organizations, communities, networking events, or mutual friends. Shared dreams becomes incredibly important. Instead of living separate lives, both partners continuously supports each other's ambition. Financial gains after marriage may also become because both individuals work together towards common goal. Okay, the relationship feels optimistic, supportive, future oriented. Okay, now finally we arrive at the 12th house. One of the most spiritual placement of all of this placement often indicate a deeply karmic connection. Sometimes the spouse comes from foreign country. Sometimes the meeting occurs in a scheduled environment. Sometimes destiny arranges the encounter in unexpectedly mysterious circumstances. Many astrologers associate this placement with soulmate relationships because the emotional familiarity feels unstable profound. If it almost as through both souls recognizes each other's immediately. The marriage teaches compassion, forgiveness, spiritual surrender, inner peace. Okay, material success may still come, but it is also longer than primary purpose of the relationship. The deeper purpose becomes spiritual evolution. Now, although the birth chart reveals the external circumstances, there is another chart that every serious astrologer must examine before reaching the final conclusion, which is Navamsa, also known as the D9. If the birth chart shows the seed, the Navamsa shows the fruit. Okay, many relationships appears wonderful during early stages, but gradually lose emotional strength over time. Okay, others begin with tremendous difficulties, yet eventually becomes remarkably stable and fulfilling. The reason often becomes physical inside Navamsa. The D9 chart reveals what the marriage eventually becomes after everyday life begins. When excitement fades, when responsibility increases, when both individuals being seeing each other's strength and weakness clearly, that is where the true quality of marriage reveals itself. If the moon Darakaraka occupies any angular houses such as first, fourth, seventh, or 10th house within the Navamsha, it usually strengthens the long term emotional foundation of the marriage. Even if temporary difficulties arise, both partners naturally find their way back towards each other. The relationship possesses resilience. Alright. However, if the moon Darakaraka falls within the more difficult houses like 6th, 8th, or 12th in the Navamsha, greater emotional maturity becomes necessary. This does not automatically predict an unhappy marriage. Rather, it suggests that both soul choose a relationship designed for significant spiritual growth. These marriages often requires patience, communication, forgiveness, and conscious emotional effort. The aspect received by the moon inside Navamsha also deserves careful attention. If Mars strongly influences the moon, emotional disagreements may become more frequent. Small misunderstandings can escalate quickly if both partners react impulsively. The lesson becomes the lessons become learning patience instead of immediate emotional reaction. If Saturn strongly influences the moon, emotional expressions may initially feel restricted. One partner may appear reserved. Duty may temporarily outweigh romance. Okay, uh, sometimes there is an age difference between both individuals, but Saturn also grants endurance. Okay, if both partners remains committed, the relationship often becomes stronger with time. One of the deepest concept in Jaimini astrology is the relationship between Atmakaraka and the Darakaraka. The Atmakaraka represents the soul itself. The Darakaraka represents soul standing beside you. When these two planets are studied together, astrology begins revealing the hidden purpose of your marriage. Imagine your Atmakaraka represents discipline, responsibility, and structure. Now imagine Darakaraka is the moon. Immediately we notice a fascinating contrast. Your own soul seeks responsibility. Your spouse teaches emotional openness. One teaches strength, other teaches softness. One teaches endurance, other teaches empathy. Neither is superior, but both complete to each other. That is the beauty of karmic relationships. Your spouse is rarely identical to you. They possess very qualities they possess the very qualities your soul still wishes to develop. Every disagreements, every emotional conversation, every challenges, every reconciliations gradually shapes your consciousness. This is why Darakaraka should never be viewed as merely as marriage indicator. It is one of the greatest spiritual teachers within the entire birth chart. Of course, every planetary archetype also carries a shadow side, but the moon is no exception because the moon governs emotion. The greatest challenge within the placement often becomes emotional hypersensitivity. Sometimes the spouse becomes deeply affected by criticism. Sometimes emotional resonance becomes extremely important. Sometimes environmental tension affects them so far more than they can admit. This is why creating a peaceful home becomes one of the greatest remedies for Moon's Darakaraka marriage. Emotional safety is not a luxury, it is necessity. Never dismiss their emotions simply because they seem small to you. What happens what appears insignificant intellectually may feel enormous emotionally. Listen first, understand first, respond gently. Validation heals far more effectively than argument. Classical remedies also emphasizes strengthening the moon itself. Worshipping Lord Shiva, who carries the moon upon his head, is considered one of the most powerful spiritual practices for harmonizing lunar energy. Fasting on Mondays with sincere devotion helps aligning the mind with the moon's calm frequency. Alright, offering food to the needy or feeding learned Brahmins generates nurturing lunar karma because moon naturally represents nourishment, care, and compassion. These remedies are not superstitions. Okay, their deeper purpose is to cultivate the very qualities to the moon represents: gentleness, patience, compassion, emotional steadiness. Ultimately, that is the true remedy, because every external practice is simply helping awaken the internal transformation. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of the moon as Darakaraka. Your spouse does not enter your life simply to love you. They enter your life to teach your heart a language that may have forgotten. Okay? The language of empathy, the language of emotional presence, the language of unconditional care. In a world that constantly teaches us to become a stronger, faster, and more successful and more independent, the moon quietly reminds us of something equally important. That real strength is found in emotional distance. It is found in emotional openness. Real intelligence real intelligence is not measured by only logic. It is also measured by compassion and true success in marriage. All right, it is not built upon perfection. It is built upon two people choosing every single day to become each other's safest place in the world. If the moon is your Darakaraka, then your marriage is simply a relationship. Your marriage is not simply a relationship. It is a sacred classroom where your soul gradually learns that the highest form of love is not controlled or possession or dominance. It is nurturing. It is acceptance. It is emotional presence. And when those qualities finally becomes a part of your own nature, you realize something extraordinary. The person you thought destiny the person you thought destiny sent to complete you was actually sent to help you discover the most compassionate version of yourself. All right, now if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who wants to understand the deeper karmic meaning behind the future spouse. And if you'd like a personal consultation or a detailed analysis from your birth chart, you can find all the details in the description down below. And until then, keep learning and keep growing. And remember, the greatest soulmate is not the one who changes your destiny, it is one who changes your heart. Jai Shri Ram.